Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the Dodgers have set their opening day roster. We have thoughts on the starting pitching, the bullpen, and the outfield situation. We'll talk about all that, plus the Dodgers' first game of the Freeway Series, their last series of spring training, heading into opening day later this week. That's what's on tap, so let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now, and then you will never miss a day because you know we're not going to. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snyder. My co-host is Vince Samperio, although it's just me today. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. We've also both spent time covering the Dodgers in the press box and the locker room. So we're not quite insiders, but we bring you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue every weekday morning. Today's episode is brought to you by Ultimate Baseball GM. Ever dreamed of becoming an MLB GM and managing your baseball franchise? Then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimatebaseballgm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners get 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON in all caps in the game. And we made it through the long off season. We are at the precipice of opening day. It's Monday, March 27th. And on Thursday, March 30th, the Dodgers will be playing meaningful baseball. They are currently playing slightly more meaningful baseball than they've been playing the last month and a half because they played a game on Sunday night at Dodger Stadium, which was exciting. The first game of the Freeway Series. The last two games of that series will be in Anaheim, and then a day off on Wednesday, and then opening night on Thursday. It's exciting. 4 years ago, the Monday before opening day, leading up to the Monday of opening week, is when we had our first episode of Locked On Dodgers. Vince and I have been doing an episode for 3 years previous to that called the Scully Avenue Podcast. It was a weekly podcast, and we had done 138, I believe, episodes of that show. And then David Locke came to us and said, hey, would you like to change your name to Locked On Dodgers and start doing it 5 days a week? And we said, no. But then we said yes. And we started doing that. March 25th, 2019 was our first episode as Locked On Dodgers. Now we're well over 1,000 episodes in because, as I mentioned, we don't miss a day. And we're not planning on starting now. It's exciting. Spring training is basically wrapping up. The Freeway Series is always exciting because we got to see the new lights at Dodger Stadium, the new LED lights, and stadium looked good, looked bright. James Outman got to bat at Dodger Stadium for the first time, hit a home run, which, that's what he does in his first at bats, I guess. Outman officially made the roster, as Vince talked about the other day. He's not technically the starting center fielder, but I am going to talk in the third segment today about Trayce Thompson and his role on the team. And Trayce is Outman's main competition for playing time, it seems like. I've got some thoughts on that. Clayton Kershaw pitched on Sunday against the Angels, looked great, went 6 innings, struck out 7, very efficient. Everything looked good. Fastball was sitting about 90, which is apparently what he is now. Dave Roberts did mention after the game that Kershaw was even throwing a changeup. So, it was a good last spring start for Kershaw. He threw a little bit more in the bullpen too, just because they didn't want him to go 7 innings because they had relievers they needed to get in the game. And relievers is maybe a good place to start this episode because the Dodgers did announce their opening day roster over the weekend. And the bullpen is about what we would expect. But that maybe some, not really surprises, with Daniel Hudson and Jimmy Nelson both starting the season on the injured list, that opened up a couple spots for guys who maybe hadn't necessarily earned them. Phil Bickford, kind of the main one. And I mentioned a week or two ago, I think it was last week, that Connor McGinnis, the Dodgers, one of their assistant pitching coaches, mentioned specifically Phil Bickford and the work he put in the offseason. It seemed like the team is a little bit higher on Bickford than I am, I guess. And my lack of being high on Bickford mostly has to do with the fact that he was really bad last year and has been really bad this spring. He did pitch an inning on Sunday to bring his spring ERA down to 5.40. And it's even, I think when we talked about him last week, I mentioned that his ERA looked good because he had allowed 3 unearned runs. And then his next time out, he allowed some earned runs too. So his ERA doesn't even look good anymore. His whip still looks solid. But yeah, I mean, he's not striking out guys. That's the main thing. 3 strikeouts in 6 2/3 innings. And I mean, the 6 2/3 innings is maybe the most important part of that. It's a very small sample, but we do have all of last year when he had a 4.72 ERA in 61 innings for the Dodgers. He was their worst relief pitcher. And that was a team that had the ghost of Craig Kimbrell on it. Phil Bickford was their worst relief pitcher last year, but he is on the opening day roster because of injuries. And the other one that isn't a surprise, but isn't necessarily earned is Shelby Miller. Shelby Miller also pitched on Sunday, closed the game out, and pitched a scoreless inning to bring his spring ERA down to 6.43. He is at least striking guys out. He threw 7 innings this spring and struck out 11 guys, didn't walk anybody, and allowed 1 home run. So, like, underlying numbers, Shelby Miller looks like he's going to be okay. Like I said, it's not a surprise that he made it because the Dodgers signed him to a major league contract. He can't be optioned. So they're not going to cut bait with the guy they signed because they were high on him. And that's the only real way. Barring an injury, he has to be on the roster. And so Shelby Miller is in the bullpen, the whole bullpen, the 8 relievers. There's the guys that we knew were going to be there: Alex Vesia, Evan Phillips, Bruce Dark-Gratterall, Yancy Almonte, and Caleb Ferguson. Those are the 5 that have been sure things. Ferguson was less so until we heard Mike Pryor talking about him. And so we've known those 5 guys were going to be in the bullpen. Then you got Bickford, you got Shelby Miller, and you've got Andre Jackson. And Jackson is the long reliever. And it kind of came down to between him and Michael Grove, probably. In the second segment, in a couple minutes, I'm going to talk about Ryan Pepiot being the 5th starter. That was the other role that Michael Grove was up to. But like I said a week or two ago, for me, Michael Grove, because he is still kind of a work in progress, he wasn't as highly touted a prospect as even Pepiot, and definitely not Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone. And so Michael Grove, for me, it seems like he needs to be starting regularly. And so a long relief role wouldn't have made sense for him to me. So really it was the 5th starter or starting in AAA. And I think that for the Dodgers, they wanted him continuing his development in the minors. I think he could be a perfectly passable 5th starter in the big leagues right now, but they have other options. They have Ryan Pepiot, who is maybe a step ahead of him prospect-wise, step ahead of him stuff-wise, and doesn't need quite the development time that Grove does. Grove, when the Dodgers called him up last year to start, he was coming straight from AA. And so he did pitch in AAA later in the year, but I think at least half a season of AAA for Grove will help him in his development a lot and give the Dodgers a better idea of what they can expect from him going forward. So Andre Jackson as that long reliever makes a lot of sense. He's been almost exclusively a starter in the minors, but he's been exclusively a reliever in the big leagues, and he's pitched really well in that role for the Dodgers the last couple of years in very small samples. But Jackson, I'm pretty excited about him. I think he definitely has the stuff to get one time through a lineup. And so a 2 or 3 inning relief guy, that role makes a lot of sense for Andre Jackson. I'm excited for him to get this opening day roster spot. It's a big deal to make a team out of spring training, even if it is as a long reliever. It's a big deal for him, big deal for Ryan Pepiot. It's his first opening day roster spot. Obviously, Miguel Vargas, it's his first opening day roster spot, and James Outman, it's his first opening day roster spot. Kind of funny moment on Sunday, Dave Roberts was talking to the media and mentioned that Miguel Vargas kind of asked him, you haven't told me about my roster, my opening day status. And Dave Roberts kind of laughed, I assume you knew. You're our starting second baseman. And I don't think Vargas was really concerned. I think he probably knew on some level, but he's like, I'm a rookie. I need to be told that I'm on the opening day roster. So that was kind of funny. But I am going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about the starting pitching decision, Pepiot over Grove, and what I'm excited about with Ryan Pepiot pitching in the rotation to start the season. So I'll be back in a minute. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Ultimate Pro Baseball GM. Pro Baseball GM is the coolest game I've played in a long time. I've always thought it'd be cool to be a Major League GM, and it turns out it is pretty fun, but it's also not super easy. I never thought it was easy, but I thought I'd be better at maybe than I am. But if you ever had that thought that it would be fun to be a GM, if you fantasize about managing your own franchise, go download Pro Baseball GM immediately. The game allows you to manage every strategic aspect of a franchise, playing through seasons and leading your franchise and fans to glory as you build a historic dynasty. In the simulation, you're responsible for all sorts of stuff. You have to manage team finances, hire the coaches and the staff, difficult personalities, scouting and drafting players, navigating your franchise through free agency, and all the ups and downs of a season. All this in a challenging and realistic world. Ultimate Baseball GM is completely free and playable offline. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. We are in a league with other Locked On MLB hosts, and it's a lot of fun going up against our friends / rivals / guys we talk to on the internet and seeing, hey, I know my team's better than yours, but am I better at this game than you are? And most of the time the answer is yeah, but sometimes it's not. You might be surprised. And anyway, Locked On Dodgers listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. So make sure to check it out. To download the game, just visit probaseballgm.com, scan the code on your screen right now, or look it up in the app stores. That's probaseballgm.com. Ultimate Baseball GM. Start your dynasty today. All right, I am back. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. It really does mean a lot to us. If you are watching on YouTube, we'd love if you comment in the YouTube comment section below. We'd love to hear your thoughts on the bullpen situation, stuff we're going to talk about the starting pitching, the outfield situation later. Any of your thoughts, I'd love to hear from you. If you're listening on the podcast, love to hear from you through social media or email, or hop on YouTube and comment there. You go ahead and watch the whole thing there too. Everybody should be watching and listening at least twice a day. That's I think that's our bare minimum. So I mentioned Ryan Pepiot is the Dodgers' fifth starter going into opening day. No word really on whether they plan on, I assume they're going to stick with five starters even when they have off days, and just give everybody that extra day of rest. Because as we've talked about several times this offseason, this Dodgers pitching staff, especially the starting rotation, could benefit from even a six-man rotation sometimes. There's a lot of guys with some age or some injury history or whatever that you might think an extra day of rest. So seems like Pepiot is going to get regular starts. We don't really know how long Tony Gonsolin's going to be out, at least a couple weeks. And so Pepiot gets, at least a few starts probably. And we'll really have to play it by ear with Gonsolin, and maybe Pepiot can force himself into a role. And Noah Syndergaard is hopefully going to be good. We don't know that for sure. And, with other injury risks and everything, maybe by the time Gonsolin comes back, somebody else needs a break. We saw it with Cody Bellinger in 2017. He came up because Jock Peterson, I think, got hurt. Cody Bellinger came up, played left field. And then he, after a couple slow games to start, he just started hitting. And by the time Jock was healthy, they're like, well, we can't send Cody down. So they finally convinced Adrian Gonzalez to go on the injured list. You can force your way onto a roster, force your way to stay on the team. We saw it last year with Trayce Thompson, who I'm going to talk about in the next segment. Trayce came in just to fill in for an injured Mookie Betts and ended up staying the rest of the season and making important, if unsuccessful, starts in the postseason. So you can force your way into a role, and that's Ryan Pepiot's opportunity. Pepiot's been on the podcast before. We're hopefully going to have him on again soon. I've been texting with him, and we're just trying to figure out the right time. Now that I kind of missed my window with him during spring training, and now that he is on the opening day roster, he's kind of focused on getting ready for that. But hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we're going to have him on the show and talk a little bit about that opportunity and all that stuff. It's exciting for Pepiot. His changeup has looked really good this spring. Not quite Gavin Stone good, but really, really good. And I'm excited to see it, because that was really Pepiot's two issues last year. His changeup took a step back, and his command wasn't there. And both of those have been a lot better this spring. Small sample size, I know, results, blah, 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 blah. But Pepiot, he earned this spot, and hopefully He's got a good fastball and a great changeup. And if he can mix in that slider, he should be able to be pretty successful to go 5 or 6 innings to start. We got to temper our expectations with him, but I'm hopeful that Pepiot can have a pretty solid season. He had a good spring, and the stuff looks good, and that's all you can really hope for. And then we'll see as the season goes on. You've got Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone. The names Michael Grove and Gavin Stone, I don't know why, like they're not that similar, but they're so similar in my head. I get those mixed. I don't get the pitchers mixed up, but I get the names mixed up. But anyway, Bobby Miller is behind Stone on readiness just because Miller hasn't pitched much this spring. Just I think physical little ailments have kind of slowed him down this spring, whereas Gavin Stone has pitched really well. Both guys will be pitching in AAA early in the season, and I expect to see both of them in the big leagues this year because they both have really good stuff, and it's going to come down to situations. What happens? What spots open up? Do the Dodgers have to force an opening for them, or do the openings come naturally? All that stuff that plays out over the course of a baseball season. If you think back to a year ago, if you had told me the Dodgers are going to win 11 games and Trayce Thompson is going to be a big reason why, imagine if somebody told you that a year ago. You wouldn't believe it. And so who knows what's going to happen? We don't know what's going to happen with Jason Hayward. Don't know what's going to happen with Noah Syndergaard. Ton of guys, David Peralta, James Outman even. I'll talk about Trayce Thompson next segment. A lot of different guys on all over the field. We don't really know what's going to happen performance-wise, health-wise, all that stuff. And so we could be surprised later in the season by who we see on the big league roster that we're not even thinking about right now. It seems to happen pretty much every year. And so no point in guessing who that's going to be. Although I did a few weeks ago, you remember I predicted that Cody Bellinger would be a Dodgers midseason acquisition. That was partly tongue in cheek. But I will talk in a minute about my reasons for that prediction because I kind of danced around it that day, and I've danced around a couple other times, but I have some concerns about Trayce Thompson that I'm going to talk to you about in a minute. But yeah, Ryan Pepiot in the starting rotation, exciting for him, exciting for the Dodgers. I am going to come back in a minute. I'm going to talk about Trayce Thompson and his role on this team and what we can expect from him and kind of the outfield situation in general. So thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. And please continue to keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Built Bar. And the Built March Madness bracket is here. We know you have a favorite bar or puff, and now's your time to make it count. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for your favorites. And if you're like me, you might get there and just be physically angry that cookie dough chunk puffs and cookie dough bar had to go against each other in the first round. They're the two best things Built has ever made, and putting them against each other in the first round just is not fair. That should be the final matchup, and they should tie, and they should be co-champions because these cookie dough chunk things, oh man, they're good. If you haven't tried them, you got to try them. Go vote for them. I voted for the cookie dough chunk puff. I like that a little more than cookie dough bar. It's a little smaller, and so it's a nice little snack. I like the puffs a lot, and the cookie dough chunks on top, really, really good. So that's who I've been voting for. You go vote for your favorite, and you will be entered into a drawing where 50 lucky Locked On listeners will get a free box of Built. Not only that, but one Locked On fan will win a 12-month subscription to Built to have Built's best bars or puffs delivered monthly straight to your door. You got to try Built. It's the best protein bar ever. They're amazing, and you will be shocked when you realize how good for you they are. They're all covered in real chocolate, high in protein, low in sugar, delicious, healthy. It's crazy. Go to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite bar or puff and pick up a box while you're there. You can vote every day in March, so hop in and support your pick. All right, I am back. I want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. It really does mean a lot to Vince and me. We love talking Dodgers with you. We hope you love talking Dodgers with us. We would love to hear from you. I'm going to give you the contact info at the end like I always do, but we would love to hear your thoughts on this episode, your questions about future for us to talk about in future episodes, your comments, your concerns, anything you got. We'd love to hear from you. Again, I'll give you all the contact info at the end. So let's talk about this outfield situation. Looking at the Dodgers opening day roster, and it's kind of funny. They don't have technically any backup infielders. They're listed with just one guy at each position. Obviously, they have a backup catcher, but first base, one guy, Freddie Freeman. Second base, one guy, Miguel Vargas. Shortstop, one guy, Miguel Rojas. Third base, one guy, Max Muncy. And then outfielders, 6. And so 3 backup outfielders. Of course, Chris Taylor can play the infield and will play the infield plenty. Mookie Betts can play the infield and probably will get some time there. Although they said he was going to get some time at second base in World Baseball Classic. I think he played there 1, maybe 2 games just in mop-up duty. Like, I know when they were blowing out whoever they blew out. Was it Cuba? Anyway, I know Mookie Betts got in the game at second base late in that game. They really didn't seriously consider putting Mookie there in any meaningful games. Mostly they had shortstop Tim Anderson playing second base because their only actual second baseman on the roster was Jeff McNeil. And despite cheating to win the batting title last year, he didn't cheat. He just wussed out. Anyway, he's not actually great. And so they went with Tim Anderson, who's better. So the Dodgers have Chris Taylor and Mookie Betts, who can play the infield. And then they got Trayce Thompson, Jason Hayward, David Peralta, and James Outman, all pure outfielders. And the center field situation is interesting because James Outman is on the roster. Dave Roberts said we wouldn't have put him on the roster if he wasn't going to get a lot of playing time, which is good. He's going to get a lot of playing time. Even if he's in a strict platoon with Trayce Thompson, the Dodgers generally face about 3 times as many right-handed pitchers as lefties. And so that would still be Outman getting about 75% of the starts in a platoon. A platoon is interesting just because Trayce Thompson hit righties much better than lefties last year. And James Outman hasn't really gotten the chance in the major leagues to try to hit lefties. And so hope he gets some opportunities against lefties. But it does make sense that when he does get a day off, it is against a lefty. Trayce Thompson, though, I have major concerns. I love Trayce Thompson. I am a huge Trayce fan as a person, even as a player. I think, excuse me, I like Trayce Thompson a lot. I'm not convinced that he's good. And I want him to be good. And the good thing is, I mean, he's got power. So even when he does struggle, he can run into one, and be good or be productive. But last year with the Dodgers, I mean, he batted, what did he bat last year with the Dodgers? Yeah, 268, had a 901 OPS, which is really good. 900 OPS, very, very good. It's a 145 OPS plus. I mean, he was 45% better than league average for the Dodgers last year. I just don't know if that's sustainable because he had a 36% strikeout rate last year. And the scary part is that's not really that far removed from what to expect from him. His career strikeout rate is 30.6, and even that is lowered a lot by his first couple seasons when he was 2015 with the White Sox and 2016 with the Dodgers. He had reasonable strikeout rates, but since then, starting in 2017 through last year, his strikeout rate is 36.7%. It's just not sustainable. The problem is it's really hard to be a good player, a good hitter when you strike out that often because you need a very high batting average on balls in play. Last year with the Dodgers, his BABIP was 389. It's just not sustainable. His career BABIP is 281. If his BABIP last year had been 281 instead of 389 with that strikeout rate, he would have been unplayable. And that's my concern, is that he will come back. He has never had a BABIP. His rookie year is 341. Since then, he's never had a BABIP higher than 255 before this last year. And so if we drop down to 255, he'll be terrible. And this spring, he hasn't done a lot to excite us because, he's batted 094, which spring results, not that big a deal. He was away from the team for a long time because of the World Baseball Classic. But if you take his time in spring training and his time in the World Baseball Classic, his strikeout rate this spring is 33.9%, which is a little bit better than the 36% he did last year with the Dodgers, or 36.5, 36% with the Dodgers. Not much better. And 33.9 would still be basically the worst on the team. Last year, guys with a strikeout rate worse than 33.9% for the Dodgers last year, Chris Taylor, Trayce Thompson, Edwin Rios, Joey Gallo, James Outman in 16 plate appearances, Tony Walters, and Tyler Anderson. What do all those guys except Outman have in common? Not very good hitters. Definitely strike out too much. And 33.9, like Cody Bellinger last year, 27.3%. Like, if Trayce is going to be productive, he needs to get that strikeout rate down, because he's not going to have a 389 BABIP this year. And that's my concern with Trayce. In a nutshell, is he hasn't yet shown that BABIP is sustainable. There's not much reason at all to think it is. And he hasn't shown any kind of over his career. He has shown that he strikes out way too much, and he hasn't shown the ability to overcome that. And I am happy for Trayce that he got a guaranteed major league contract this year. I think it's great. It's the first time Trayce has ever made real money in his career. It's great. I am so happy for him. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets DFA'd mid-season or even earlier. Like, if he doesn't figure things out, if his strikeout rate stays in the mid-30s and his BABIP regresses to something more sustainable, he's going to be unplayable, which is good news for James Outman. It's good news for David Peralta and Jason Hayward. It's bad news for Trayce Thompson, and it's bad news for the Dodgers. It's a bummer. I'm already preemptively bummed out about the Dodgers cutting Trayce Thompson later this year. I hope I'm wrong. I know I'm not wrong about the analysis. Looking at what he's done, I hope that I'm wrong about my pessimism in his ability to overcome that. And the problem is, we're like 6 years in. 6 years that he has struck out way too much. It's the reason that he bounced around from team to team and couldn't get a regular role. The reason that Trayce got that contract isn't because he fixed his strikeout problem. It's because he had an unsustainable BABIP. And unsustainable is called unsustainable because it's not sustainable. And so maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe Trayce Thompson is, maybe he's made some change that now he is fundamentally a 389 BABIP hitter. I just don't think so. And I'm bummed about it. I'm not rooting against Trayce. I am rooting for Trayce, rooting hard for him. I really want to be wrong about this. It's hard to see it happening though. So that's my thoughts on Trayce Thompson, and it's kind of a bummer way to end this episode. I hope he has I at least hope he has some moments for the Dodgers, because even if he's not good enough to play every day, maybe he could stick around on the roster as a bench player, a guy who pinch hits. We're down by 3. There's 2 guys on and 2 outs in the 9th inning. We need a homer, something. Maybe he's your guy. But I don't know. It's hard to see a role for Trayce on this team. And I hope he figures one out. That's going to do it for me for today. We are looking forward to opening day later this week. We want to hear what you're excited for about opening day. If you're going to the game, let us know. I don't think I'm going to be there. I think Vince probably will be. I'm just not able to make that trip right now. So I hope to get down there soon to Dodger Stadium pretty soon. My Venmo is the same as my Twitter handle. If you want to join the Jeff Dodger Trip Fund, I'm mostly kidding about that. I just appreciate you listening. If you do, one of the way you could help me financially, I guess, is to listen every day and watch on YouTube every day and tell your friends and family who love the Dodgers. The more people who watch and listen to this podcast, the more I can afford to go to Dodger games. If that matters to you at all, matters to me, but I'm more personally invested in that than you are. But anyway, thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. You can win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. Find Locked On Fantasy Baseball wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Like I said, please make us, add 1 or 2 days a month to your rotation if you're not listening every day. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at Vince Semperio. I am on Twitter at Snydog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com. And our phone number for voicemails or text messages is 323-863-LOCK 5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.